Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome, folks, again to the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. Welcome again. As you know, we're going to be getting in, come March, if you will, I guess we'll probably figure out who are going to be running for the various offices, especially president, and from the two major parties. And there are other parties, if you will. I'm not trying to take anything away from them for that matter, but the fact of the matter is, we're going to have, if you will, photos. We're going to have platforms and the like. And from an Oregon Voters Digest standpoint, that's when we're going to actually get into the whole issue of politics. Right now, some folks are just kind of hedging on, you know what I'm saying, I'm going to run, I'm not going to run, even from a local standpoint and aspect of it. So it's very important that if you're going to run, that you file to run for office. And I'll probably see you after March, once the filing deadline is over with, and then we'll just get into the business of it all. But at the same time, up to that particular point, we're going to, as you note, my format is to inform and educate you. And up to that particular point, we're going to have some preludes, if you will, and some of the things we're going to be doing. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. One of the individuals that I've been working very closely with has been Deborah Mervin of the You Choose group. I mean, it's quite a group, if you will. I've met with them over the last year or so, and they bring quite a bit to the table, issues that we should all be concerned with, but of concern that might be very much instrumental in determining who are going to be the electorate, after the March aspect of it. So that's what we're going to be doing here in the Portland area, and that's why I think that You Choose bring quite a bit of knowledge, if you will, to the table. And so we got a program that's going to be coming up on the 21st of February at Portland State. And they're going to be talking about some issues that I think might be concerning. You probably hear some of some of the logos, if you will. One of which would be Occupy Wall Street. Then there's the Tea Party aspect of it, whatever. But I've got two people with me today that are going to talk about these two issues and how do they relate. And then there's some other variations that they're going to probably bring up to the table. One of these two people will be doing that for us. And maybe we might be able to even talk a little bit about, go back to Occupy Portland and find out what that's all about, and a little bit about that, and some of the relative points, if you will, in the whole issue of the Occupy whatever, for that matter. So anyway, bear with us, and I think my guest will give you some good information. As you know, my role, if you will, is to personalize it a little bit as much as I possibly can, and theirs is to get the message across. And I think that's going to be great, because we're fortunate, if you will, to have community television as we have it here, because now you don't have to worry about traveling to New York or around the country trying to figure out what is going on when you look at that tube, if you will. And I might make a point, and I've always done this every time we all have our newspaper, our TV, our Audible through this smartphone. We're very familiar with this piece aspect of it, but a lot of times it doesn't make sense, got me? Because everyone's got their own views. But anyway, that's what the Oregon Voters Digest will do. Try to break through all of these so-called situations and get it back down to simple. The old KISS adage, keep it simple, stupid. Boy, I tell you, you can sleep better too at night, right? Well, welcome to the show, folks.
Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. As you note, you've met Chana before. We talked about education before. We had quite a conversation about that.
Yes, we did.
We got to talk a little bit more about that. It's a big thing now.
Oh, yes.
Governor Kitzhaber he's now the superintendent. He's the head superintendent of the state.
Don't get me started on education. We'll never get off of it.
Weren't you part and parcel of putting him in there along that line?
What? Yes.
We'll hold him out one.
We'll hold him.
We got to talk about that.
Stop me once I start.
But we got to fuel the deal. We got to talk to the piece and possibly bring him here on the table.
That would be wonderful.
That'd be okay with you?
I would love to talk to him about it.
And our future is here with us also too. I'm talking about Ethan Epstein. He's also part of You Choose, and he's going to also be one of the keynote speakers at Portland State.
That's right.
And talking about his subject matter, and I think it's really great. So if you have some time, do participate at Portland State, because as you know, the young people are there. They're all in a kind of a debating kind of an atmosphere. That's one point of that. But the fact of the matter is, it's very educational, and I would encourage you to attend that particular forum. I don't have the dates right off the bat, but you got the number there on the tube. You can call Deborah. Deborah, I'm sorry, but I put your number up there, but that's okay. It was cut. But she's working very tireless to do that. But anyway, they've got some very interesting events. We're going to continue to bring them here. And it's possible we're going to probably see if we can get those videos from those presentations that the two of you all are going to be participating in. And we're going to run them here on Oregon Voters Digest on YouTube.
Wonderful.
That'd be okay?
That would be great.
Good. Well, so just like I said, this is just a prelude, folks, and we're just going to get little snippets and this, that, and the other, but at the same time, we're going to try to personalize it. But that message is going to be, that total message will be at Portland State on the 21st of February, so please attend. Okay, let's just jump right into this. Chana, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, what brings you here today?
What brings me here is that I want to talk about the meeting at Portland State on the 21st, which I think, in addition to being educational, is going to be a lot of fun. And I want to talk about the differences and the directions that the Occupy Wall Street movement are taking, and the Tea Party, because I believe fundamentally that they share common goals. And in some sense, they share common opponents. What they don't share is the method by which those goals would best be achieved. And that's really what we're going to be speaking about at
Portland State.
Portland State.
Okay.
And we'll do it by basically not talking theory. We're just talking about concrete reality and history and comparing places like North and South Korea, or Houston and Detroit, or California and Texas. See what is working to increase prosperity for everybody, and what is working against increasing the quality of education or health care. What's our best shot at going forward and making real progress on these problems that we all agree are problems?
What if I were to ask you, just again from our viewership standpoint, how would you define, if you will, the Occupy Wall Street movement and at the same time the Tea Party? Could you give me a definition of each one of those?
Well, I think Ethan might be able to help me on this.
Let's join in this piece. What do you think?
But I think that we have to recognize that neither the Occupy Wall Street nor the Tea Party are some sort of unified political party that speaks with a single voice, but that overall the emphasis in one, the Occupy Wall Street, is for more government regulation, more taxes, and basically more class conflict. And that the emphasis on the Tea Party side is for return to constitutional principles, less government, and more decision-making in the hands of individuals. But it's also, they are both solidly against crony capitalism, big banks, big business taking over the political process. I think that they are totally agreed on that.
Ethan, what do you think, man?
I think that's, as Dr. Cox points out, it's inherently problematic to talk about these groups because they don't have one manifesto. They're not organized as a political party, which, flies under the same flag. So, I am perhaps not quite as charitable in my view of Occupy in the sense that its goals are particularly laudable. I'm not trying to alienate anybody here, and this is just from my own experience watching, particularly how Occupy Portland behaved. I think there's another issue is that Occupy Portland is different from Occupy Wall Street in New York, which is different from Occupy Oakland, which is different from Occupy Hong Kong, which even actually does exist. I think ideally, and I'd like to think it's true, that both the Tea Party and Occupy are about broad-based prosperity and about making it so that everybody can get a good education and live a life of material comfort. On the other hand, I've been somewhat distressed to see a more broadly sort of not just an anti-big business, but an anti-all business mentality, at least, emanating somewhat from Occupy Portland. And that, if you want broad-based prosperity, that is, the wrong way to go, I would say.
So when you say all business, what kind of businesses did you see that were being attacked by Occupy Portland?
Well, for me, a seminal moment was when they blocked the port.
Okay.
Or at least attempted to block the port. I mean, if you want to look at the epitome of high-paying blue-collar jobs, especially in the city named Portland, they're occurring at Port of Portland. Those are, many of those people don't even, let alone college degrees. I know some are even high school dropouts that work at the port, and many of them, they make many times my salary, you know, and that's from doing blue-collar, honest work. And why would, aside from a general anti-commerce and anti-trade perspective, why would you want to prevent the port from operating? So that was probably the most glaring example.
Dr. Cox, what about as far as the makeup of, let's say, the Occupy Portland group, from what you've seen from the media aspect of it? Do you feel comfortable enough that these were folks from Portland, from Oregon?
You know, I'm not a big follower of the media.
Okay. But what was your sense of?
My sense is that in the Occupy movements all over the country, that there was a moving group of people coming from outside town to fire things up for their own political purposes. And that by and large, while the Occupy movement represented itself as being from or for the working classes, that actually these kids were not working class kids.
Okay.
They were the kids of the educated middle class. And in many cases, their primary goal was, or resentment was, about education debt. Well, you're not going to have education debt unless you're already in college.
Eaton,
I think that was most clarified in Occupy Oakland. Oakland is a what's known as a majority-minority city.
Okay.
I believe the majority of the population is black, yet something like 98% of the Occupy Oakland were white kids. And, you know, and it's not a broad-based representative of working-class people.
Right.
But I think that was true in New York, too. And when genuine street people started moving into these Occupy camps, it's the people in the Occupy camps resented them and rejected them, sometimes for very good reasons. But these were not revolutionary kids coming up from the underclasses or from the unemployed classes. They were kids who had gotten sucked into getting a college education, going into debt. They didn't realize that their share of the public debt is many times their education debt. They're going to have to pay both of them. But those are already kids that are not training themselves to be dock workers.
So where do we go with the solution? Where do we go with this? Where do we go?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily something that needs to be solved.
Okay.
You know, in a free society, obviously, I accept the existence of political organizations I don't happen to agree with.
Okay.
Obviously, a lot of it is related to broader economic anxiety. So I also think that, you know, when and if, and I would say when the economy starts humming again, we have full employment again, et cetera, that these concerns will be less manifest in the street. So I guess I'm a bit of I don't particularly like the term, I'm a bit of an economic determinist on why they exist. So, you know, it's related to student loan debt and, you know, a quite weak job market. So if those things turn around, and one will turn around with the other, you know, if they're more able to pay down their debt, then I think this will sort of naturally dissipate.
Is that something you think that we should be getting involved with some of the big banks, i.e. the biggies, in terms of the resolution of this thing? For these loans and whatever?
These loans are not really big bank loans. 2 years ago, I think more than 2 years now, the government took all private banking out of the student loan business. And that was against the wishes of the colleges, because the private banking actually facilitated the process fairly elegantly, and the money went to the colleges in a more timely fashion. It was less paperwork. But it's now all in the hands of the federal government.
So it's not in the bank's hand. It's in the federal government's hand.
Yeah, and the banks are no longer, as I understand it, I may be wrong, even making the original loans. It used to be kind of you went to the bank, you got a loan, the federal government guaranteed it in some sense.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Now I think the banks have been taken entirely out of the circuit. So that for the loans that are being made now, it's simply the student and the federal government. But I may be wrong.
And I also believe that that's money that can't even be discharged in bankruptcy. So
I know that that's the case.
So it's
like IRS.
Exactly, because of just what you're saying. There's a government entity, I believe it's called Sallie Mae, which handles most of the student loan debt, and they're not forgiving.
Even if you go bankrupt.
Yeah, even if you go get bankrupt, you can never discharge them.
But from a lay standpoint, the idea was, what was being said was that student loan was made by the bank. You go ahead and make the application for the bank, I guess, and then all of a sudden you said the government, I take it, guarantees, i.e. guarantees the loan, if you will, right?
But that has not been the situation with the present administration. They took the banks out.
They took the banks out. They have assumed
and there's definitely an instructive parallel here with the housing market, where a lot of the anger is directed at private banks making bad loans. But of course, a lot of that was also tied into the public lenders like Freddie Mac.
And the government requiring the private banks to make
loans to people that they might not have otherwise given them to. And that ended in disaster. I can see why that was a goal of, George Bush talked about creating an ownership society, which was actually something that I respected in principle, that if people have ownership in their communities, they'll be more inclined to be good citizens, etc. But obviously, it didn't work out as well as we had hoped.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the Tea Party's position in this thing from your perspective, in terms of how do they fit, in terms of that. Do they have any such goals, if you will, in rectifying the situation?
Well, I think that the Tea Parties, at least judging from organizations I'm associated with, like you choose, our first goal is to make sure that the education that these students are going into debt for, and that the education K through 12 the taxpayers are paying for, is worth the price. I think one of the biggest problems is that the college education and the K through 12 education is not delivering on the fundamental promise of educating people and making them capable of having jobs, but even educating them. And from our perspective, from the Tea Party perspective, get a quality product and open the market up for competition at the college level. Right now, the colleges, whether state or private, basically set their own prices. And they're allowed to do that. And they shouldn't. There was a Sherman antitrust case against the Ivy Leagues, and I don't want to go into the Supreme Court decision. But basically, what the government said is colleges can set prices. Then they subsidize those with student loans, and as soon as you get a subsidized loan like Stafford or Grant, the price of college education inflated tremendously. Right now, according to the Department of Education, and I always get to education, according to the Department of Education, Arnie Duncan, we have the highest per capita college costs of any of the developed nations. And the highest per capita K through 12, and the highest percentage of GDP. And we have an increasingly poorer education system as far as performance. So average price to educate, that's not the tuition, to educate a college student in the United States is now $26,000 a year.
What's the breakdown of that in terms of who gets the money?
You would know better than that.
Any ideas about that?
I would say it's kind of like the $12,000 or $13,000 in Portland for K through 12. Very little of that money ever gets into the classroom.
Where is it?
It's in administration. It's in all kinds of other things. It's in things that now schools are supposed to be providing, which are good things. It's just that it's not improving the educational system.
And these sort of structural problems are not unique to education. I was reminded that, this sort of misappropriation of public money is happening all throughout the public sector. Take a look at TriMet, which has, I think about half, I did an article on this, about half of their money that they spend has nothing to do with transportation. It's PR, it's product, it's development. And I was actually looking in the salary database. They have more than 70 people making more than $100,000. And this is, mostly, again, PR, various administrative positions, not even bus drivers that are working a lot. And so we're seeing a similar thing there as well, where we're having reduced performance, where they've just now announced another round of bus cuts and a raise in fares and increasing costs. And where's the money going? It's the same question.
And so the Tea Party position on this is introduce a little competition. Get charter schools going, which are very often funding students at half the rate of the regular public schools. Homeschool, virtual charter schools. Introduce competition on public transportation. There's monopoly on taxis. There's you could have small independent bus companies running particular routes. They do in other countries.
Sure.
And that would bring down the price.
And would probably improve the product at the same time.
Yes, because the small independent companies have to drum up the business. They have to sell you on it. Look what competition has done for the churches. I mean, every church has its own natural market, and it's filling its own the needs of its parishioners. And the Tea Party wants to see these things taken over, not by big business, but by individuals who say, hey, wait a minute, I have a lot of friends who are taking their kids from this school district out to Beaverton because now they can do that legally. Maybe I can organize a car service. And now if that person wants to do that, they've got to file basically $50,000 worth of permit applications, and they're not going to get the permits. Any more than your 7-year-old is going to be able to run a lemonade stand anymore, or your cancer patient is going to be able to do a garage sale. Those things have been closed down in this city in the interest of protecting the public. Well, I don't think it protects the public. It just gets you higher and higher and higher costs for less and less. So Tea Party is saying, let's open this up to individuals in the community running these businesses. How many, last time I was here, you were talking about how Head Start started with local women as teaching aides, and that was very successful. And then all the bureaucrats got involved and said, well, they don't have the credentials. So we have to hire somebody at 3 times the cost who isn't somebody's grandmother or somebody's mother. Well, it turns out the grandmother is much better at doing the job than a so-called qualified outsider.
Well, let me share a thought here. When you think about as we are today in regards to the electorate at one point in time was just the electorate. A person would come and campaign, if you will, I do the right thing, if you will, got elected to office, and things were happening. And then all of a sudden, now the electorate, if you will, sort of like 90%, and those who are elected are 10%, just like the Congress they're talking about. They're running about 10%. I mean, the same people that are actually coming out and lobbying, i.e. for these ideas, the moment they get elected, if you will, they're part of this other group. How do we get back to
I don't know if that's entirely true anymore.
Okay, all right. What is
I see signs of hope in Oregon because in 2008, we got new people into the state legislature.
Okay.
And while anybody in the state legislature has to basically compromise to some extent and be bipartisan, we're getting much better legislation out of the new people cooperating. Even the most extremists of the old parties have now moved to the edges. The middle is stronger. So I don't think that in our system, and I am one of my fields of expertise is constitutional government. I don't think our system is designed for radical, quick change.
Okay.
But I think that what we're seeing at the states and local levels is that localities and states are changing.
And I
but
think,
not Portland.
Well, that yes, and I was going to say, and I'm considerably less worried about elected leaders as I am about sort of the permanently entrenched bureaucracy.
Okay.
Particularly in a place like Portland, where you have these city departments, and in my own reporting, I've tried to, I've gone through the pulling teeth like experience of trying to actually talk to these people that supposedly work for me as a Portland taxpayer,
right,
but the arrogance and this sort of bureaucratic mentality where they feel like the citizens are not people that they're supposed to respond to. And I'm not like lobbing, broadsides at them. I'm just asking them questions as a citizen. And these people are deeply entrenched, and I don't think, it looks very difficult to me to dislodge that.
And they have never held a job in the real economy.
Yeah, mostly.
They don't even know anybody who's ever held a job in the real economy.
Well, going back to that legislative point you made from the standpoint you feel somewhat comfortable with our present group that we have down there.
I feel better about it.
You feel better. But now, do you feel it's the same legislature, if you will, that enacted the new educational policy of the governor? How do you feel about that?
I think that was part of a compromise. That what the group of the legislators that I'm more sympathetic to, and You Choose does not do we don't do candidates.
Okay, no.
Those people put forward a desire to have more charter schools, to stop moratorium on virtual schools, to allow everybody in the state to be able, without the approval of their home district, to send their kids to any public school in the state. Mm-hmm. And the governor said, well, we ain't going to give you any of that stuff because we don't agree with it. And then they sat down together and the governor said, well, will you give me total control and this other thing, and then maybe I'll give you these other things.
Okay.
So we had 5 different laws. Now, Suzanne Bonamici, who's no longer a candidate, voted against all the pro-choice charter school laws. But it was agreed that there were enough Democrats who were willing to support the increase in school choice, as long as there would be enough Republicans who would be willing to support Governor Kitzhaber's power grab. So if you just take the power grab, I don't think it's going to work. I told you that last time. But I think the whole package represents compromise, and I think that the electorate wants bipartisan solutions. So I have suggested on Oregon Catalyst bipartisan solutions to all kinds of things. Every time I do, the right comes after me, the left comes after me. There's no bipartisan solution is going to get real enthusiastic support from either side. But I think that in order to make progress, we have to begin to be willing to give each side what they consider essential. And what Governor Kitzhaber considered essential was total control from cradle to grave of the educational system. And I was willing to go along with that, Bruce, because I don't think if you give it to him in law, he's going to have it anyway. The basic fallacy is that all of these control things like No Child Left Behind, they just cost us billions and billions of dollars. They never work. They never actually give you control, because control at the end is in the hands of each of those bureaucrats who doesn't talk to anybody.
Well, on that same note, on that No Child Left Behind piece, I noticed that the administration is basically had listed folks who didn't have to adhere to the whole No Child Left Behind, but Oregon wasn't on that list. What happened?
I don't know either.
I don't know.
I don't know
what happened.
But with any administration, but particularly with this administration, Obamacare and No Child Left Behind, they give special deals to their guys.
But I thought Oregon was a special deal here. I mean, it voted for
Oregon
Obama.
is so solidly Democratic that they don't have to worry about losing us.
They shouldn't have gotten a better deal, wouldn't you think?
No.
It's Ohio. He's got to dangle the cheese.
You're going to dangle the cheese to the people who might actually, possibly, not vote for you. But in Oregon, we're on the plantation. That's what Herman Cain said. We are on the plantation. They don't have to give us anything. We're already on the plantation.
Well, I think about the congressional race. We talked a little bit about this off-air aspect of it, and the difference between how the numbers in terms of percentage of loss. It's almost just mind-boggling. I would have thought that from an education standpoint, the charters and a lot of those folks are kind of like more conservative, I think, within that district. Are they not?
They were until 2012, evidently.
Oh,
I was genuinely taken aback, and again, I don't mean to sling insults to our potential viewers, but again, as I was saying earlier before we went on, these Oregon Democrats are the most robotically Democratic constituency I've ever encountered. I mean, if New York City can elect many Republican mayors, Los Angeles has elected Republican mayors. I mean, these are areas that vote 80% Democrat if there's a presidential election or something, but they are not so ideological that they don't occasionally cast pragmatic votes. And I was very surprised in that wasn't the case with especially Washington County, which. Look at Washington County, if you want to talk about comparisons, look at Washington County versus Multnomah County. Mm-hmm. Washington County has managed to lure all of the big businesses, not, from Portland, or cities that just bypass, or companies that bypass Portland altogether and go straight to Washington County because they've made it a more business-friendly environment. Mm-hmm. It was stunning to me that the electorate there didn't sort of reflexively vote for the candidate of business rather than the candidate of government, which is what Bonamici was. Mm-hmm. I mean, she was... The candidate of public employee unions, as far as I was concerned.
Interesting.
I think that one of the goals of the Tea Party is to tell people who own a restaurant or who run a moving business that it's okay to be in business, because more and more of the businessmen, even in Washington County, feel that to say, look, I run a moving van, that they have to apologize for being in business. They've internalized any business as theft, kind of thinking. They just don't have the courage of their own convictions anymore. And I was stunned by the results as well. A part of it is that there was just so much more money raised and spent from out of state by the Democrat, and Rob Cornelius just didn't have money. But if we're comparing Washington to Multnomah County, if you just look at the charter schools, the Washington County, you can get charter schools set up, and there's almost impossible to get charter schools set up in Multnomah County. Mm-hmm. If you look at there are places in southwest Portland where the border runs between Multnomah County and Washington County, Beaverton, and the housing price for the identical house on one side of the street, Multnomah County, is much, much lower than the identical house on the other side of the street.
Why is that so?
Taxes, yeah.
Taxes.
And that's accepted within that community.
Well, it's not accepted, it's reality. You can ask $100,000 more if your house is on the other side of the street.
If there's an empty house, it means someone's not willing to accept it, too. Yeah.
Wow,
So you can just go on the map and look at Zillow and say, well, is this going to be a cheap house or is it an expensive house? Well, it's going to be expensive if it's in Washington County because the taxes are lower, the other kinds of costs of operating in Washington County are lower. Operating in Multnomah County is very difficult.
Well, as I listened to the two of you in regards to the whole issue of Washington County and that election aspect of it, those weren't the discussions, if you will, during the campaign. Most of it was negative advertising. Negative.
And I think Bonamici realized that if the argument were about that, that she might have lost, but she would have been closer. It would have been a closer election. So what did they talk? They talked about abortion. These were issues that the media and the candidates sort of moved to be into her area of strength. So it's probably a socially liberal area. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of women that might have been or just pro-choice voters, I should say, that would have been inclined to vote for, a pragmatic, business-oriented Republican who got scared with a bunch of rhetoric about abortion, which was irrelevant in a congressional election. I think it was partially that the issues were obscured and partially the the robo-dem effect. But you know.
You think that's going to be the norm? Do you think from this point, is it going to continue to mushroom into just that, and that is just negative, not dealing with the issues of the concerns? Therefore, they're the rise of the Tea Party, so to speak. People concerned, but you can't do nothing.
Well, I should probably be the more optimistic among the two of us because I'm younger. But vis-a-vis Oregon, I mean, look at New Jersey electing Chris Christie, Wisconsin electing Scott Walker, Michigan electing Rick Snyder. I mean, these are business-oriented Republican governors that are doing wonderful things for their states. And in that same election cycle, who did we elect but, a retread failed Democratic governor? So, given that the fundamentals of the elections were the same, the economy was bad across the country, and the fact that Oregon, even given those extraordinary circumstances, didn't elect a different kind of candidate, it gives me pause, at least.
I don't think Oregon is as yet as bad as California, but Washington State is better than we are.
Yeah.
In every respect, they're outgunning us. They're more business friendly, they're more competition friendly, they welcome individual innovation. We don't have any, we may have one or two, but basically all the companies that made Oregon's Silicon Forest, they're either no longer in existence or they're no longer operated out of Portland.
Again, along that same line, the debate now in Washington, i.e. between R's and D's, and even the debate during the Republican candidates at this point in time, talking about the whole issue of Obamacare, and they've always sort of associated Senator Ron Wyden, if you will, working with Republicans to counter President Obama and the administration and the Democratic Party in regards to Obamacare. I thought that was interesting.
I think that Ron Wyden is a good senator.
Okay.
And I was extremely pleased when Ron Wyden was with Gordon Smith, and they got good stuff done for this state. And they talked to each other and they worked together. That should be an example for everybody.
And I thought it was regrettable that the Republican that he had worked with on that issue was defeated in a primary. I mean, if we're talking about political polarization and a lack of bipartisan, if something is bipartisan, that in itself is seen as suspect by a certain quarter of the electorate. So a Democrat support, it must be bad. And I think there was that healthcare bill, Wyden-Bennett, which was about decoupling health insurance from your job, which is probably something that needs to be done ultimately.
I think it does.
And Bennett lost in a primary as a result of that, which I think was a shame. And now Orrin Hatch might lose too.
So, I'm not advocating for any of these candidates in particular, but people have to have the courage, like Wyden has and Paul Ryan, to say, we will give up something to get some sort of a bipartisan plan for health care that makes sense to both parties.
Well, why didn't Senator Wyden, wasn't he able to get together with the Obama administration and made that compromise, made the argument, made the change? What happened?
Because the people in his party don't want compromise.
Here in Oregon?
No, nationally.
Yeah.
And here in Oregon. Here in Oregon, they're not up the food chain
The fact
enough.
that we can count the two bipartisan Washington politicians on our hand is a sign of polarization on both sides, I would say. And I would say that the way elections are set up, candidates tend to be rewarded based on not the way we would traditionally think of job performance, not what you deliver for your state so much as do you push the right ideological buttons. So Gordon Smith was an excellent senator for Oregon's interests, but he lost because of the ideological predilections of the voters here. In a normal job environment, you're judged based on your job performance. I don't think that occurs, particularly in federal elections, where it's all about the party.
Well, it certainly didn't occur for Congressman Wu. Basically, you go to Congress and the people who step out of the pack to work with others, to present real positions, they're not rewarded by the electorate. in the Tea Party are trying to change that. Now, in some sense, we're going to be more extreme, but I think of it not as extremism so much as changing the line of scrimmage. We're trying to move the line of scrimmage more into the middle of the field, rather than fighting the battles 5 yards away from Cesar Chavez's goalpost.
So are we saying now that maybe the definition of Tea Party might be now a Green Party, Independent Party, just right on the line, and maybe the two major parties are kind of like getting to the point that they're looting? Any thoughts to that?
I think that at this point, the most Tea Party people are still prepared to go with the major party, because given the structure of the Constitution, the other parties cannot have. The way this government is set up, it's a two-party system. You think
percentage, so there are Tea Parties on the Democratic side and Tea Parties on the Republican side?
Well, the Tea Party's on the Republican side, and not that they're totally happy with the Republicans, as you pointed out, and the Occupy movement is on the Democratic side, not that they're happy with the Democrats. But there's just no alternative. And the last time in which there was seriously 3 parties, well, not the last time, but the most dramatic time, is in the election of Abraham Lincoln. He won with 40% of the vote because the Democratic Party split into 2 parties.
Yeah. And I mean, even
and
when
once they split into the Democratic Party representing the slave states, and then the Republicans, which was a brand new party, could win.
And even when you occasionally get a third-party candidate who lights a fire with the electorate, like, in Bill Clinton's election where he won partially, he never got a majority because Ross Perot was running as well, but that was never translated into a party that made a difference. It's a personality issue more so.
So I think that the third parties are always going to distort those elections.
I see.
So if there's a strong Green Party candidate, it's going to weaken the Democratic turnout. It's always going to work counter to what you thought you were setting it up to work for.
What do you think about the Republican debates that are happening now from the Tea Party's perspective?
Oh.
Who's going to be the outcome? Any thoughts to that?
To be frank, I haven't followed this national race that much.
Okay.
I think I'll probably, and with that said, I'll probably go with the conventional wisdom that Romney will probably be the nominee.
I don't know who will be the nominee, but I really feel that the Republican people in the Republican Party who would make the best president did not have the courage to serve their country when their country needs them.
I absolutely agree with that.
That's a good point.
I don't think it's the electorate. I think that this was a time when we needed men of courage or women of courage who would step forward, who were qualified, who had the history of getting votes and getting things done, and they did not come forward.
But again, at the same time, many people who I've talked with is that they're afraid because of the whole idea of the closet issue. Everyone has something in their closet, and a lot of times these things will be brought out as opposed to the issues at hand.
Well, most of them are already elected officials, so presumably the skeletons have been exposed.
Yeah, but only until you put the president in front of your name.
But they accused. You can't get much dirtier than the Jefferson-Adams presidential election. Jefferson's guys accused Adams of having to be committed to a mental institution, accused him over and over of being crazy. Meanwhile, the Adams guys were accusing Jefferson of fathering illegitimate black children. I mean, they got ugly.
So was John Cain.
Yes. And they were fighting duels to the death over those elections.
Oh, wow.
It was very popular to go out there with political difference, face off at 10 feet. So... yeah, it was tough.
Okay.
But what do we need national leadership for? We need tough people.
All right. That's the last word. In fact, we need tough people. I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe we wind down. Maybe we might get former Governor Bush down in Florida. You never know. Things might happen well, anyway, that's another good point. But again, I want to give you sort of a demonstration, a feel for the You Choose folks, the group that are working here within our state. I mean, right up front with you, they're dealing with all kinds of issues on all levels levels, just being very pointed, opening up for questioning and this, that, and the other. So again, like I said, I would entertain the idea. I'd like for you to entertain the idea of joining them at various locations around the state on the various issues and basically educating you about what is going on. And I really appreciate the fact that Debbie and her group and your group and whatever are actually actively participate. Leadership and coming to the table. We really appreciate that, okay?
Yeah, well, I'm my own little field. I'm tough.
I know. Both
no
of you
skeletons.
are.
No skeletons here.
Okay, I tell you what we'll do. We're going to take a short break, and then what we're going to do, and I hope you guys will stick around for a minute, we're going to pay tribute to Whitney Houston. There are some things about her and that maybe we should recognize about her, and so we're going to figure out why was that so, and we've got some folks that are going to maybe call in, and we'll have a little discussion about that, okay? We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
You are watching Oregon Voters Digest. This program can be seen again on these channels on these dates and times. Tell a friend.
Ready?
That's it. You're on. You're on.
Okay. Welcome back, folks. And as I indicated before, I want to thank again the YouChoose people for giving us the opportunity to have some of their participants here with us today. And again, I got to put that point again on the 21st of February at Portland State. Please attend, and they're going to have events all over the state, all over this city and whatever, and you can get those addresses and numbers and whatever. Okay, so what we're going to do now is that we thought we'd spend a few minutes with doing whatever our little situation in recognition of Whitney Houston. You know, she just passed away, and boy, she was something else during her days and whatever. And so we just thought we'd just try to reflect that. We're going to have her photo on the screen, and a gentleman by the name of Bob Dye, who's been around for quite some time. He's been on the show on several occasions, and he had some comments, and I thought they were very interesting. And so what I want to do, I want to start off this so-called recognition to Whitney Houston with his comments. Is he on the line? Bob, are you on the line?
I'm here.
Okay, let's see if we can. I think we got a couple of captions of her, and we're going to go on and put that on the screen. And Bob, would you mind making your comment? What do you think about that, Bob?
Sure, Bruce. When you and I talked this morning for a minute, because I was hoping you would do something on Whitney. You know, it's easy to forget. Well, we can't forget what a talent she was, but she single-handedly, I believe, helped pull this country together 21 years ago during the Super Bowl. Now remember, in 1991, on January 17th, President Bush mobilized 1 million National Guard and reservists. We already had thousands of people, including my nephew, on this in Saudi Arabia on the Kuwaiti border, waiting to invade. The next day, on the 18th of January, Iraq attacked Israel. It was a dangerous, volatile time. The Super Bowl was almost canceled. They finally decided they just couldn't do it. They had to go on with it, but they scaled down the big name halftime entertainment, and they had, of course, security was incredible. So if this time we were nervous as a nation, and then Whitney sang the Star Spangled Banner like it had never been sung. She smiled the whole time, and it was inspirational, it was powerful, and I think that one defining moment of her career brought the whole country together for a little while and gave us some faith, which we badly needed. That's my comment. There's a lot of other things you can talk about Whitney. She was a wonderful talent.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate that very much. Okay.
Yes.
And by the way, I've got my guests who I've asked to stick around a bit and whatever. You can keep the line open if you got any other comments. Anybody who have any other comments, please give us a call. And you put the number on the screen if you like. We got about another 8 minutes or so, and you can give us a call at the number. We're live here today, and if you want to have comments about Whitney, I appreciate that very much. Especially young folks, get that in there, whatever. But you know, the other thing about that particular piece he talked about, that was the first time that the national anthem, which was sung, had on the so-called chart, the music chart and whatever. I guess it was number 4, number 5.
I saw that, yeah.
You saw that? It was huge.
Yeah.
It was the first time it's ever been done that way. That national anthem, that's us.
Yes.
If you will, and that's never been done yet before, you know what I mean? So I thought that was something that we need to make sure that we recognize that in regards to her and her contribution from that land. Because the other side of the coin is that there were some issues in regards to the drugs and things of that nature, but too often we always tend to identify the negatives as not the positive. And in this particular case, she was recognized as a true American, bottom line. And even to this date, I had to listen to the song, if you will. I listened to the national anthem about 3 or 4 times, even after I heard about the draft, because that was the one that really struck me, like Bob. And he called me, and we had a discussion about that. That's why we did that. Any thoughts about that? How about yourself? When you're the young person, do you know anything about Whitney Houston during that particular time? Or?
Well, during that particular time, I was probably not cognizant of Whitney.
Okay, right.
But, well, I was saddened but not surprised because of the reasons you were describing.
Okay.
But yeah, I know her as the singer from The Bodyguard and things like that.
Was that right? Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
That was a good
Kevin
one too.
Costner.
Do we have a caller on? Yeah. Oh, we got a caller. Caller, you're on. Your question or comment, please. Any comments?
There you go. I want to say, first of all, that Whitney Houston is
Turn it up. Wait a minute. Hold on. Turn it up a little bit, so we can hear him. Turn it up.
Turn it up.
That Whitney Houston was a great talent.
Okay.
And I think it's important to recognize that first and foremost that she's an entertainer. And the second part about this is that things occur with people. People have all kind of challenges, and I think you're correct in that one point, Mr. Broussard, that she's a person. And the other part of that piece is that we must understand, too, that we can't get to the point where we assume that a person's evil or bad because bad things happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other side of that equation that I think that she represents our country in a sense. We all need a metamorphosis. I see that you have the 2 great Tea Party era people or Ron Paul people on the show there. And I think we must understand that America is kind of like Whitney in a sense. We need a comeback. But more importantly, I think what we need is an understanding that the challenges we have are far greater than individuals. It's a collective.
Yeah.
And even though you can talk about the drug problem, America has a drug problem. Look at the number of prescription drugs that America takes. Look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at as you turn on TV and every minute, alcohol is a drug. One of the biggest industries in America is what? Marijuana.
Hmm.
Okay.
And so we must understand that she is a byproduct of our culture, and maybe all we need to do is look inward to understand that a little bit of Whitney's in us as well.
Good enough. Thank you.
And I think that as I think about the wonderful songs that she had sung, I had seen her a number of times in in concert at various kinds of things, she was still a mother, a daughter, a wife, a friend. And I think we oftentimes forget that the pressures of society sometimes hit those who have achieved great honor. It hits them the hardest. So we need to put it in context and be mindful that there was a soul that was lost.
Okay.
Not because she was Whitney Houston the singer, but a soul.
Okay.
And so that's my point.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. So, again,
I don't think there's anything I could say to.
Yes.
That was a wonderful call-in, and she did represent so much.
I'll be right with you,
and
Colin.
that musical tradition represents so much of the soul of America.
Good. Appreciate that. Okay, calling on the air. Your question or comment, please.
Mr. Broussard.
Yes, sir.
A wonderful show. Thank you for having this time to reflect on Whitney Houston. My comments will be very brief. I think that this is an opportunity for American music lovers to really celebrate the canon of American music in a very strategic and specific way. And here's what I mean by that. I know a lot about Willie Nelson, the great songwriter of country and western and bluegrass, but I would like to know if other Americans can celebrate Whitney Houston like I can celebrate Willie Nelson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On that note, real quickly.
I have no trouble celebrating Whitney Houston like I would celebrate Willie Nelson.
Okay.
And Whitney is not, everybody that we know who has gotten to fame and fortune in that industry has had weaknesses, very often the same weaknesses. A few months ago, a British singer died from an entirely different background. I think we have to celebrate, and the cost of great art is very often great personal problems.
Yes. You're right on. Well, look, on that particular note, we're going to close with that.
Okay.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Deborah, thank you again for allowing these folks from You Choose to be on there. Looking forward to your programs. Again, as George Page always said, back to what you believe in. Have a good evening. I'll see you next week.